Thank you. Good evening and welcome to our first public meeting to gather input and feedback on draft biosafety regulations. I'm Sigal Reese, Director of Health and Human Services. I'm going to do just a brief introduction, allow my colleague in Economic Development and Planning to address the group, and then introduce a consultant who will handle the majority of the presentation. Take a quick look at the attendees. We are expecting some additional staff in the fire department to join us, so hopefully they'll be coming on later if we do have any questions that deal with hazardous materials. But I want to thank those that have attended, and again, those that are watching the recording. Public health departments and boards of health in Massachusetts have unique authority to implement policies. That protect public health in our community under Massachusetts general laws. And in Brookline, this authority is delegated to the director role. As part of the statute, there's the formation of the Advisory Council on Public Health, which we call ACPH in town, to advise the director on policy. And the department works very closely with ACPH on a variety of policy initiatives. In the case of these regulations, we've also worked with the Economic Development Advisory Board, as they've done a lot of work thinking about biosafety and laboratories in the framework of zoning and economic development. And Will Dorfman, Economic Development and Long-Term Planner, has been a key partner as we start to build out this policy. And I want to give him a moment if he wants to introduce himself and say a few words.
Thank you, Sigal, and thank you everyone for attending today. Sigal mentioned, my name is Will Dorfman. I'm an economic development and long-term planner within the Department of Planning and Community Development. Work specifically in the economic development and long-term planning division, and one of the major goals that we work on is to promote the commercial development that enhances the tax base and supports the business community within the town of Brookline. As Sigal mentioned, we work closely with the Economic Development Advisory Board, and in 2021, EDAB, as they're known as, convened a laboratory and life sciences subcommittee to explore opportunities to pursue life science development as part of the town's economic development strategy. At the time, when this subcommittee was formed, there has been a significant boom in the life science development in the Boston metro area, with over 20 million square feet of existing space and another over 20 million in the pipeline at the time. And while the market has slightly cooled off in recent years, the Boston region will continue to be a major epicenter for life science development and industry, and will continue to attract life science companies and the workforce for that. While places like Kendall Square have traditionally been the hub of life science in the Boston area, in the last few years, a lot of neighboring communities, especially those directly surrounding the town of Brookline, have experienced a major development in life science real estate, including places like Watertown, Newton, Fenway, just to name a few. And given Brookline's location and also being located near the Longwood Medical area and its highly educated workforce, the town was seen as to be in a great position to be able to participate in the regional life science boom. And so at the time, as a result, the Life Science Subcommittee came out with a report to outline the potential for development and release some key recommendations. One of which we'll be going over today is to establish a regulatory framework under the Public Health Department that would oversee the licensing and safety regulations of any new life science proposed uses within the town, which we'll be discussing further today. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sigal to carry it on.
Thank you, Will. I do want to make a note that there was a new version of the draft regulations that was placed online today at about 3:30 that incorporated a lot of the feedback we got from Economic Development Advisory Board and the Advisory Council on Public Health. We'll continue to update the website with revised versions as we continue in this process. And I also encourage, if you want to know more about the municipal role in regulating and working with laboratories, there's a link on that website to a recording of the Cambridge Biosafety Forum that is very informative. And we will place the link in the chat to the website that has all that information. As we move through the presentation, please place questions in the Q&A box. And at the end of the presentation, if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand and Darlene will elevate you to a speaker. I will monitor the Q&A and raise those questions for a consultant after the presentation. And as you can tell, the session is being recorded and the link will be placed on our website. Now for the main attraction, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Caruso. Rebecca is an independent biosafety consultant who has been supporting directors in public health throughout Massachusetts since 2006. Rebecca currently audits approximately 50 permits annually. She has also written and/or revised many biosafety regulations around Massachusetts. Over her tenure, Rebecca has also attended numerous IBC meetings, some in a capacity as a biological safety officer or administrative director. Rebecca oversees close to 2,000 active biological research projects and over 300 new projects each year involving biological agents at Harvard Medical School. Between 2002 through 2010, Rebecca was deeply involved in the development of biosafety procedures, training programs, design and operational procedures, and biosafety oversight for the National Emerging Infectious Disease Laboratory at Boston University. Rebecca also serves as the Biosafety Manager and Alternative Responsible Officer for the Federal Select Agent Program at BU. Rebecca obtained a bachelor's degree in biology from Marist College, a master's degree in public health from UMass Amherst, and is both a registered and certified biosafety professional with ABSA International. She has presented at several national meetings, including the American Society for Microbiology and the American Biological Safety Association International. So welcome, Rebecca. We're so lucky to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Sigal. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here and to share with everyone a little bit about an overview of the draft biosafety regulation that we have shared with everyone on the website. I'm going to actually have Sigal share my slides, and I'm going to go over a brief overview of these regulations. And as she said, I will be happy to take many questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Next slide.
Sorry, I'm trying to progress the slide right now.
No worries.
We didn't practice that part.
No worries. And if there's a delay, I'll start talking as well. So the next slide is just my agenda. So this is kind of the topics I'm going to cover. I'm going to give you an overview of the draft regulation, talk a little bit about local, state, federal oversight, what we see as the oversight in Brookline with this regulation. I'm going to talk about the creation of the biosafety regulation, some of the key components, and also talk about what an inspection oversight audit program looks like in other towns and what are some of the key components. And then we'll try to summarize some key points and take your questions. So next slide. So I think Will Dorfman already touched on this slide already, so I'll just pause for a minute and just say, we think that having this kind of regulation for the town of Brookline will really assist with supporting critical cures for research and critical research on unknown, cures for diseases at this point. There are a lot of best practices nationally and locally. You could next slide. So I just want to say that there are a lot of best practices just in the state of Massachusetts for having these regulations. In my years of experience working in biological safety, I've worked with the towns of Boston and Cambridge in particular very closely over the years. And they have regulations both for, Boston has a regulation combined for recombinant organisms as well as biological agents. And Cambridge has two regulations, one for recombinant and one for biological agents, but both have requirements for permitting process, et cetera, for BSL 1, 2, and 3 laboratories. BU is also registered with Boston as a BSL 4 lab, but that's the only BSL 4 in the area. And there's lots of other municipalities around the state of Massachusetts that have these regulations. Examples are sometimes I think already named today. So Watertown, Belmont, Bedford, Lexington, just to name a few, Grafton. And they all vary in what their content might be or what they cover, but for the most part, they're really regulating the use of recombinant and synthetic nucleic acids and the use of biological agents in their town. And then the town makes a decision, what level of biosafety containment are we going to allow in this town? And that's just, and they look at the federal standards as well, which I'll talk about, I think, on the next slide. And I said inspection is a key component of all these other towns as well. They all have some kind of inspection audit program, and the annual renewal of the permit is part of that process. Next slide. So I thought just to capture both what's in the draft regulation and also set the stage for questions, I have just the next few slides are going to touch on definitions, because I don't know those of you that are watching live or watching the recording probably are all from different backgrounds in Brookline. So this definition here is really a definition from the Department of Health and Human Services for biosafety. So that field of science is really about protecting the environment, protecting the community, protecting people from accidental exposure, unintentional release to materials, typically in a laboratory, clinical research, diagnostic type setting with biological materials. There's also certain components that they can be used to protect. So biological hazards can be, they can present also in human materials, agriculture as well. So that's why there's USDA regulations as well involved with select agents, for instance. There also can be some dangers with wildlife or in the environment, but in the case of what we're looking for today, with biosafety regulations for the town of Brookline, we're really focused on the human risk and the environment risk with working in laboratories. Next slide. So the next definitions are the levels of biosafety. So I wanted to just capture this in the draft regulation as well. So there's 4 main levels of biological safety, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This regulation is only proposed to regulate BSL-1 and BSL-2. There's no allowance in this regulation draft of BSL-3 or BSL-4. So that means that there can be no permit applied for those 2 laboratory types. So BSL-1, the main difference between 1 and 2 is also in design and construction and also in what they're working with. So BSL-1, the material is not known to cause disease in immunocompetent adult humans, whereas BSL-2 is associated with human disease and can pose moderate risks. And I can always talk about examples in the Q&A. Why don't we go to the next slide? So a regulated biological agent, this is something that we want to capture in the regulation. So we've been using this term in the draft. So a regulated biological agent for the town of Brookline would be something that would affect mammals, plants, a bacteria, virus, fungi, rickettsia, protozoa. We may want to add yeast to this definition. I just realized that's missing, or any naturally occurring bioengineered or synthesized component of, let's say, recombinant or synthetic nucleic acids. So we have these 3 stipulations here. It could be only used in a BSL-1 or 2 lab. It could be a recombinant or synthetic nucleic acid material. Or 3, it could be a select agent if it's a risk group 1 or 2. In other words, used in a BSL-1 or 2 laboratory. So that would be what we would cover for agents in the town of Brookline. Next slide. So I purposely put these 2 committees on the same slide to make a point about it. These 2 committees or councils are really part of a partnership between the community and the labs that will be in the future joining the town of Brookline. So the Brookline Biosafety Advisory Council is really an advisement council where there will be community members that can volunteer. 2 to 4 members of the community can volunteer to join the council with other leadership members of the town of Brookline. And they can advise and review the work and the labs that are proposed to move into the town, and also provide advisement to the Director of Public Health and Human Services. The IBC is another role that a community member could volunteer to learn about the research and the work that's going on. The main difference is the Brookline Biosafety Advisory Council would be, they would be appointed by the Director of Public Health and Human Services, and they're part of the town, whereas the IBC is actually company-based. So each company that moves into Brookline will have an IBC, and they'll be looking for 1 or 2 community members to join their IBC. to learn about the research, to provide feedback, et cetera. And I can answer questions on that later. There's different, you could say, background and experience, and also time commitments for these things and what we might anticipate if you're interested, but you're not sure about the, if you can make a commitment. I think those kinds of things will become clear as the regulation is finalized, and over the years, buildings are matched for appropriate lab use. But I just wanted to point out that these two are really a great opportunity for anyone on the call tonight that's interested about the regulation, or maybe you have a neighbor who might be interested in doing some volunteer work. This is one way to do that and learn more about the lab. So next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit more about federal and state oversight here, and the next slide about what we envision for local oversight for the regulation. So you can see I put a quick list, and I know I missed some. There's definitely more, but the main things is that there would be any regulation for biosafety. Normally it refers to the NIH guidelines, which is the NIH guidelines for research involving recombinant synthetic nucleic acids, commonly referred to as the guidelines or the NIH guidelines. This is something promulgated by the Department of Health and Human Services. It's something that the oversight for goes back, actually dates back to 1976. I won't get into the historical details tonight in the interest of time, but there's a long, long history in the US of regulatory oversight for these materials nationally. And so it's considered best practice if you have a local or state regulation that you refer to these guidelines and you abide by them and you follow them. So that would be something we would be doing here with this draft biosafety regulation. There are a few others I've listed here. So BMBL stands for Biosafety, Biomedical Biosafety Research Labs. It's the joint publication between CDC and NIH. They publish every few years a new edition, and it is the guideline for all things biosafety. So that's something else that we would be following. And of course, you've got OSHA, DEP, FDA, and MWRA for local and state, I should say state and federal regulations for environmental protection, water quality, et cetera. So those would all have different components of the lab and what the oversight would look like. And we can go to the next slide. So for local oversight, I've already mentioned about the BBAC, the Brookline Biosafety Advisory Council, a little bit. But for oversight for labs in the town of Brookline, there would be the regulation when it's finalized. There would be established an advisory council to help oversee and support the public health director. On the institutional level, with each private company, they would have an IBC that would have community members that would be reviewing the research at least annually. The Brookline Fire Department, I know they were going to try to send a representative here tonight to the first community call. They would have oversight as well for this facility. So the main part that they would have oversight for would actually have to do with hazardous material storage. So most of you are probably familiar with hazardous material collection days in your town, and make sure we properly dispose of household hazardous waste. But just like you dispose of that properly, in labs, they have proper bins for both biological waste as well as chemical waste, and storage for materials you're working in the lab. So we want all of those things that are stored and disposed of being done properly. And the fire department is able to issue a permit and inspect the facility annually and make sure that everything is being done properly with hazardous materials. So that's why I listed the fire department. And then of course, the Brookline Department of Health and Human Services, they're going to have the direct oversight for this regulation and for permitting each facility. Next slide. So the next two slides, we're just going to talk just a quick overview of what we envision might be the key components in a lab, and also based on other towns as well. So typically there's some kind of, we define what's applicable. In this case, we've talked already on the phone about BSL1 and BSL2 facilities would be the narrow focus, that they would have an IBC, they would have a lab inspection, they would be audited annually. You go to my next slide, there's just a few more. We would be reporting incidents in the lab to the health director as soon as they happen. There would be prevention of accidental release, so that has to do with things like MWRA and protection of the environment. There would also be just a general permit process, right? We'd have a permit application, there would be a fee structure, there would be a review process for that, and then there would be an annual review and renewal requirement to keep your permit in place. Next slide. So, and then as part of this, there will be an inspection program. So it's definitely considered best practice to inspect facilities that you're permitting, at least annually. You can have someone from the town do it, or a lot of towns write in their regulation that they also may have a designee, such as a third-party consultant like myself, conduct an audit or conduct an inspection. So here's just a few components. So you've got document review process. Of course, you're reviewing the IBC, how it functions, what the roster is, what's the agenda, what's the minutes, are they properly convened, in a manner that's really reviewing the science and the safety of that science, I should say, in the facility. And then you've got the physical lab facility itself, going to the lab, walking through it, looking at the support components as well as the physical lab. So support meaning permitting, waste, PPE, personal protective equipment, all the things that support the lab to keep it functioning properly. Safety, security, pest control program, all those things, go into it. And then physically doing the actual, walk through of the lab rooms, making sure that they're being operated properly. And then, of course, the regulation of the town or city will vary in terms of what other components might be required for the inspection or what other things they might be looking for. Next slide. So for implementation of a regulation, I think it's really important that all the stakeholders are engaged, right? So we're on the phone tonight, engaging our community, recording this call so we can reach out to more community members. But it's really important that the stakeholders, all of the different representatives in the town of Brookline are aware of the importance of this regulation, the importance of having safety and structure for labs that would be joining the town of Brookline in the future. Also, having those groups that I talked about earlier, an advisory council, the BDAC, having the IBC structure that's known nationally as best practice and in line with the NH guidelines, having those as a requirement for the Brookline regulation for each company to have their own IBC to oversee the work and have community members on that. We want you to know this is a transparent process. We, as Sigal mentioned at the beginning, we've posted the regulation 330 today. She posted a revised version of the regulation that incorporated the language for the advisory council. That was the major change. If you're wondering, if you read it last week, what was some of the changes made? Some of it was cleaning it up for the community meeting, and some of it was really trying to incorporate the advisory council and what was the role of the advisory council. So that was some of the major components of that. And we're going to have ongoing oversight, I would say, of this biosafety draft process, and getting the regulation finalized. And you can be assured that it will be, just like there's other towns and other nationally, there will be ongoing oversight of each individual permittee through the auditing inspection process, through the annual renewal process, and any other times that we need to visit or oversee their work. Next slide. I just wanted to have one slide on the BVAC so you could see a little bit more who the members likely would be. So it would be an advisory council on public health, the public health chair or their designee, the Department of Public Health and Human Services individual, so that's Sigal. We'd like to have one hazardous material advisor on that committee and 2 or up to 4 Brookline residents with relevant training and experience to help advise and solidify that and help us with community outreach. Next slide. So in summary, I would say, this is the first step in the process. We're excited that you're here. We realize that the regulation, we need to gather more community input, make proper edits to it and incorporate your feedback. And there'll be continued revisions posted on the website. I believe that annual review of every facility that's permitted is really a critical piece I think also open communication between the Department of Public Health and each permitted site is also really important. Engagement through community meetings, as we're doing now, will continue. So I want to assure you of that. And then when the regulation is finalized and then appropriate sites are permitted in years to come, there will be those other advisory components. So there'll be the IBC at the local level, as well as the BPAC. Thank you.
Got to shift all my screens around now. Thank you, Rebecca. That was great. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but if anybody does have any questions, they are welcome to raise their hand and we can elevate them. And like I said, this is being recorded, so make sure to share widely with your friends and family if they want to know about it, neighbors and everything. So like Rebecca said, this is really the beginning of the process, and we hope to continue to engage with the public on it. We've gotten really good feedback from the 2 advisory boards from both departments, and we will continue to bring this to them as we go through revisions and hopefully get some more feedback from the public too. So I don't see a need to continue on unless anybody has any questions, or if there's anything, Will and Rebecca, that you want to share at the end.
No, I would just say thanks for having me tonight. And I want Brookline members to know, I'm here to help. I'm here to help with the process and excited to hear feedback so that we can work towards a strong draft and make sure that it incorporates everyone's comments. So if you have comments after today, I'm sure, what's the best way, Saga, for people to send in comments through the website?
Yeah, we can put a email up there where people can submit comments, but they can send it to the Public Health Commissioner email, which is on our website. But we definitely will take written comments too. Yeah, that's a great point. Great. Well, I really appreciate everybody coming out and watching it. And like we keep saying, this is recorded. It will be on our website. And so if people are watching the recording, again, you can email comments or reach out to the health department directly in any form. So thank you very much. Have a great night.